When we first moved up here, absolutely nobody talked about big fires. Big fires were not something, big fires were things you had in California. They weren't things that we had out here. Whenever we had a fire, it was usually a small fire, and we were able to put it out pretty quickly. And that was the case for years and years. I joined the volunteer fire department when I came up here simply because I wanted to make sure I was one of the first in line if we had a fire, because it was never a community fire, it was always a home fire. And that was the case for a number of years, and then probably in the last 7, 8, 10 years, the Hayman fire came up in 2002, and that was the first real mega fire that we had around here. And every year since then, the fires have gotten bigger, they've gotten more destructive, and they've gotten closer to home. And we knew it was only a matter of time here in the Rist Canyon Stove Prairie area before we got hit. It used to be when there was a fire, the local fire department would handle it and ask for help if they needed it. Because we've had so many big fires now, there's mutual aid agreements everywhere. And when there's a fire, we get 2 or 3 different departments in the county and the feds, everybody shows up for it. And that's what happened on that one. But it was in a very inaccessible area. It was hard to get to, and the wind started picking up right away and carrying the fire. And we knew within an hour or so that we weren't going to be able to stop this fire. So our local fire department, their job was to get out ahead of it and notify the residents that the fire was coming and that you needed to evacuate. And so we did a pretty good job. I think we got hold of everybody. They were at least aware of it. Some people never want to leave, but those that did had a chance to. And the fire just roared through there. It was maybe, might be 200-foot high flames by the time it got to Paradise Park. It was just going like crazy. And it got up here to, still going north, got up to Old Flowers Road, and then the wind changed and it moved from the north to the east. Now we are east of where the fire was, and it crossed over Stove Prairie Road and started to move up the hill here, which is a fairly steep hill, as you commented as you were coming up here. And the good part was the wind dropped down really low. And so the fire was moving uphill, as fires tend to do, but there wasn't a lot of wind driving it. And so it stayed on the ground, even though the forest down below us there is not thinned out anywhere near as well as it should be. The fire was on the ground and stayed there until it got up to my place. And you'll see the front of my place is fairly well open, and we've done that on purpose as defensible space. And we mow it, even though I hate mowing. We mow that religiously and keep the grass down. And when the fire got up and hit that defensible space, it stopped dead and worked its way right around the house. Unfortunately, where my outbuildings were, I had not done quite as good a job of my defensible space work there, and it got behind my outbuildings and burned them to the ground. And it was when they burnt, they burnt. They were really hot. I had metal roofs on both buildings, but they were made of wood, and the wood and everything in it just burnt. You can see my aluminum block from my ATV was just melted. When it got beyond the buildings, the wind picked up again, and even though I'd done thinning behind my forest, the fire got up into the crowns of the trees, and then it just went crazy and just scorched everything. And the ground for months afterwards looked like a moonscape. Nothing was growing at all. You couldn't tell exactly where the fire was going to go, and at least those first few days, there was almost nothing we could do. We had to just let it burn, and then go in afterwards and try and keep the embers that might have gotten on a house or something, get those out of the way so the house didn't burn after the fact. That's where firefighters can do the most good. You have very few chances of putting out a fire when the flame front's 150, 200-foot flames coming through. You just have to get out of the way until that's happened. But there were so many homes threatened that we couldn't hit everybody at once. We'd travel around all over the place and put out a hot spot here and then go to the next one, and maybe a few hours or a day later we'd be back at the same house putting out the hot spots again because the winds would have changed and that sort of thing. I was on the fire department. I was able to get around and see what was happening, but there were a lot of people that were evacuated and didn't really know what was happening to their homes, sometimes for weeks. And all they knew was the fire was all around them and they probably lost their home, but maybe they didn't lose their home. And that was really rough on so many people, as that they didn't know. You really learn to appreciate a community when you're having a disaster. And we've had one right after another, and so we appreciate our community probably a lot more than a lot of people right now.